The 20th century marked an important event in world history. The apartheid system was dividing the unity of South Africa. Different races were racially segregated. Some of the laws passed under the apartheid legislation were the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act, Suppression of Communism Act, and the Population Registration Act. However, apartheid was eradicated by South Africans who devoted their lives to the struggle. South Africans like Nelson Mandela. What was apartheid? Apartheid was a system of discrimination based on the grounds of race, including Bantu, Black South Africans, colored, mixed race, and white. A fourth category, Asian, meaning Indian and Pakistani, was later added.
Policy is one which is called by an Afrikaans word apartheid. And I'm afraid that has been misunderstood so often. It could just as easily and perhaps much better be described as a policy of good neighborliness.
Nelson Mandela used two important methods to eradicate apartheid from South Africa: passive resistance and a radical approach. Born in a tiny village called Mezo, 800 miles east of Cape Town, Nelson Mandela grew up well-fed, well-bred, and went to the finest of schools. He fled to Johannesburg to escape a prearranged marriage. But this was when he was exposed to the brutal reality of a racially segregated South Africa, or in other words, apartheid. He was beginning to become familiar with the oppression in his country and saw the struggle in South Africa as purely racial. Anger, rebelliousness, and a desire to fight against the system that imprisoned South Africans surged through Mandela. In 1942, he began to work in a law firm after getting his BA. His salary was £2 a week. He described in his book that he survived on the meagerest of resources, but he saw the brutalities of a racially divided South Africa while living in Johannesburg. And this was the birth of a freedom fighter. In the same year, he began to attend the meetings of the African National Congress, or the ANC. Now he was open to the world of new ideas, political beliefs, and debates. This was when Mandela realized that his life was circumscribed by racist laws and regulations that crippled his growth and dimmed his potential. In his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, Mandela stated, "I was quite prepared to rebel against the social system of my own people." He did not understand why the African citizens continued to live through the injustice they received and were not ready to fight back. During the 1940s, the African National Congress gained a mass following, and in 1955, it adopted the Freedom Charter as its mission statement. This charter, drafted by some 2,000 South Africans of all races, outlined a democratic, non-racial South Africa. The opening words of the Freedom Charter were as follows: "We, the people of South Africa, declare for all our country and the world to know that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and that no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of the people." Mandela organized and spread awareness to protest against the discriminatory policies, using only passive resistance and methods such as boycotts and civil disobedience. But the communist government saw the campaign as a threat to its security and to the policy of apartheid. Also, they had passed a law called the Suppression of Communism Act, which made simultaneous arrests of the campaign leaders in Johannesburg. And Mandela was one of them. He was sentenced to 9 months imprisonment of hard labor and suspended for 2 years. During this time, he opened up South Africa's first black law firm, which offered low-cost legal counsel to those people affected by the apartheid legislation. In 1956, he was again arrested and charged with treason during a raid against the government. Due to the riots and the massacres of the peaceful black protesters, including the Sharpeville Massacre, on 21st March 1960, the apartheid government banned the ANC. When these institutions were banned, Mandela wrote that his rights of free speech and movement were unmercifully curtailed.
In our policy, that South Africa is a country of many races. there is room for all the various races in this country.
In 1961, he went underground and also went abroad to secretly gain support. When he returned to South Africa, he also brought with him a radical approach for handling apartheid. Inspired by the guerrilla wars in Algeria and Cuba, he organized a military underground movement that engaged in sabotage. Mandela co-founded MK, Spear of the Nation, an armed militant wing of the ANC.
And so Mandela became the first military commander of the Spear of the Nation, Umkhonto we Sizwe. He became an armed guerrilla. He became a terrorist, in fact, for the South African state. And not many people know this, but the State Department of the United States government still had Nelson Mandela on the terrorist list.
MK carried out numerous bombings over the next 20 years. Many people were killed and injured. In his own words, the aim was to hit back by all means within our power in defense of our people, our future, and our freedom. When he was in prison, many political leaders campaigned for the defiance against apartheid, including his wife, Winnie Mandela, and human rights organizations such as the Black Sash that opposed the apartheid regime.
For the people of Britain to register on the widest possible scale their passionate protest against an evil and repulsive doctrine which says that a man's legal status, a man's political rights, a man's economic opportunities, a man's social position shall depend solely upon the color of his skin.
From jail, he continued to pursue the abolition of the apartheid regime and proper representation for Black South Africans in the government. International pressure and other political changes contributed to his release in 1990.
I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people.
In 1993, he shared the Nobel Peace Prize with the man who had released him, President F.W. de Klerk. The following year, Mandela became the first Black president of South Africa, winning 62% of the vote, leading to the end of apartheid.
The eyes of the world are presently focused on all South Africans. All of us now have an opportunity and the responsibility to prove that we are capable of a peaceful process in creating a new South Africa.
During an interview, Professor Anthony stated he was one of many people engaged in a collective endeavor, organized around a common purpose, democratic citizenship rights for all. During his presidential years, Mandela tackled the challenge of uniting the country's racial groups. He also fostered the economy, spread awareness for women's rights, and stood up for education. Inequities of health, politics, and economics remain in South Africa, but the country has made great strides as a democracy. He always had a vision for South Africa. One of his most famous speeches was the I Am Prepared to Die speech in 1964.
I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an idea for which I am prepared to die.
The legacy of freedom in South Africa will always be remembered as a turning point in history and the driving force of the nation. The story about a leader who used passive resistance and a radical approach to eradicate apartheid will always be remembered. All in one name, Nelson Mandela.